Yeah, we're live. It is 9:43. It's in the morning and I'm yelling already. That happens. Today we want to talk about mistakes. Yes, mistakes were made. I often go back and look at dyno tests that I've done and stories I've written or videos I've done and look at that. And then, it's harder to do immediately. It's like trying to copy edit your own writing, if you're writing a book or play or whatever you're doing. And you aren't very good at copy editing your own stuff. The way that you get better at that is if you let some time go by and then go back and look at it. Usually you can look at it more objectively. What happens is our mind fills in the mistakes. It just glances over them. That's why you have other people do that. That's why when I was writing, we had people, and I can remember how mad people used to get. Oh, I don't need anybody copy editing my stuff. I'm like, well, I've read your stuff and you need people copy editing it because you are not a writer. But I had the same thing, especially when you first start. You have the attitude that, oh, this is my thing. I don't want anybody changing it. But actually what happens is in copy editing, they change it for the better. So the same thing happens in my dyno results or the testing. I go back and look at the video or look at the results and look at the story and go, you know what? I didn't do that correctly, or maybe as good as I could have. That thing could have been better had I, done something a little bit differently. And so I wanted to go back and take a look at that. We'll take a look at the video that I did or the testing that I did. I ran a 6-liter with a single turbo. It's an S480. It was a T4 S480 from Borg Warner, from the guys at Brian Tooley and LJMS. We got that Borg from them. Actually, that was not even mine. It was on loan. That turbo, I think, actually belonged to David Freiberger. And so we just borrowed it for this test. But we ran a turbo combination on the 6-liter. I think it was the same motor that we used for the Big Bang stuff that made 1,500 horsepower. But we ran it with that single turbo and air-to-water intercooler stuff. And what I did was we ran it with a bunch of different size turbos, or not turbos, a bunch of different size exhausts. So what we did was we would neck the exhaust down to, we did a 3-inch, a 3.5-inch, and a 4-inch. And all of those were tested, unfortunately, they weren't tested at the same boost level. What they were tested at is the same position, the same wastegate, and then the same adjusted position on the manual wastegate controller. We didn't have an electronic wastegate controller on it, which would have been much better because it would have given us better data. I would argue that we did get data from this, and we did see that a bigger exhaust after the turbo is definitely beneficial. The thing definitely makes more power, and in this case made more boost also. But part of the reason that it made more boost was not just because we had more exhaust flow, which is 100% beneficial. If you have a turbo and you neck the exhaust down after the turbo going into a full exhaust, or however you do it, it is going to hurt both response and it's going to hurt ultimate flow. So it's going to make less power. And it's going to be less responsive. A lot of guys, for some reason, think that the big exhaust, because this is, when we make things bigger, we make the turbo laggier somehow, which on the turbo sizing, that I can understand that. But when you put a big exhaust on the turbo after the turbo, you free up the turbo, and it likes that. And so the response rate goes up. It doesn't go down. And so restricting the exhaust after the turbo, a lot of guys think, oh yeah, that'll at least make it more responsive. I mean, it'll hurt power. They understand that the flow restriction in the exhaust, having a full exhaust or something, will restrict flow. So they understand that that's a restriction and that it could limit power. But they think that somehow, oh yeah, more back pressure, more response. No, that's not the way that it works. There could be an argument that more back pressure on the other side of the turbo, between the cylinder head and the turbo, can change response. And what I did was we measured both of them. We measured the effect of what back pressure was feeding the turbo and then after the turbo. And naturally, there's a correlation between those. But we saw a big change in power going from the 3-inch exhaust after our S480 turbo. And we can take a look at talk a little bit about the combination here. So this was a 6-liter. It was originally an LY6. It was a stock bottom end with ring gap. It had TrickFlow 225 heads. It had the BTR Stage 3 turbo cam, a Dorman LS6 intake manifold, the truck throttle bodies feeding my 2.5-inch Y pipe, and then dual turbo smart wastegates the way I normally run it. And then we put that Borg Warner and then the ProCharger air to water intercooler on it. And then what we did was we ran this thing at the maximum of 13 pounds, where like with the 4-inch exhaust, the combination made, it had a peak of 13 pounds. It made 920 horsepower and 807 foot-pounds of torque. And then when we went to the 3.5-inch exhaust, it went down from 920 horsepower to 884 horsepower. The peak boost dropped just slightly from 13.1 to 13.0. That's a variation between one run and the other. The boost curve was a little bit different on the 3.5-inch exhaust, but the peak boost was the same. But it made what is that? 16. So it's 30, made 36 less horsepower and about 20 less foot-pounds of torque. Big things happened when we put the 3-inch exhaust on it. So it made a lot less power, made 828 horsepower. So it made almost 100 horsepower less than with the 4-inch exhaust and 750 foot-pounds. So 57 foot-pounds of torque less with the smaller exhaust. Going from a 4-inch to a 3.5 to a 3-inch exhaust made less power. But on the 3-inch exhaust, the other thing that happened is the boost pressure went down. So the peak boost pressure went down to 11.7 pounds. So it went down 1.4 pounds of boost, which is a pretty good amount. I mean, that's almost 10%. So the boost went down a lot. And if this test were done properly, the boost would have been all the same for all of the exhaust systems. Given the change in boost and the amount of change in boost, 1.4 pounds is not going to give us 100 horsepower on this motor because the motor doesn't make enough NA power for that to happen. But you can also argue that some of that, obviously 1.4 pounds of boost worth of the power change the boost drop is responsible for a portion of that power change. Now the exhaust is also, but the interesting thing on this is that restricting the exhaust, it showed a change in what's happening in the system. So if we kept our position like I did incorrectly, keeping my position of my bleed on the wastegate and the wastegate spring the same, what we've done here is we've changed the back pressure in the system because the 3-inch exhaust after the turbo is restricting the turbo. That means there's a restriction there, which is going to lose power. There's also more back pressure between the cylinder head and the turbo, which wants to push open the wastegates. So it's working against wastegate sealing. That's why we saw the lower boost pressure, because the wastegate's opening sooner. It opened sooner than it did because it basically had more back pressure pushing against it, working with the wastegate actuator, working with the pressure line, also trying to lift that wastegate open. So it had two things combined, and you put a little more back pressure in it, it lifts it off a little bit earlier. That's exactly what we saw. So we did see a change in back pressure. We saw a change in power, and part of that change in power was not just the exhaust size, which would be, hey, look, we changed the exhaust. We went from a 3-inch exhaust to a 4-inch exhaust, and we picked up 100 horsepower. Well, as always, that's not the whole story. We also picked up a 1.4 pounds of boost, which is a big part of it. But it does show you the trend toward making more power with a bigger exhaust, which I always recommend, guys. Run the biggest exhaust that you can. But, if we subtract the boost from this, the gain isn't quite as big. But we already saw a 36 horsepower change in power going from the 4 to a 3.5 with almost no change in boost, at least at the peak. So there is a difference from exhaust size and a reduction in exhaust flow after the turbo. We know that that's the case. There just wasn't the same. There just wasn't the 100 horsepower from changing the exhaust like I showed in this test, because a big portion of that was just from the boost. And, you know, you go back and you learn. What are you going to do? I mean, obviously I pointed that out in the video and pointing that out in the test, but it just would have been better for people as absolutes to go, yeah, when I go at 900 horsepower, if I go from a 3-inch exhaust to a 4-inch exhaust, it's worth this amount of power, because the boost was always the same. So it could kind of show you, so I guess still good information, but could have been better. Let's see what you guys got going on. We got to get a poll going up here. Three-inch single exhaust. Okay, would you ever run a 3-inch single exhaust on a 900 horsepower turbo LS combo? Single exhaust, remember, single exhaust. Dual exhaust, I think I would do. I would at least consider. Tim, Knowledge, YouTube, what's up? Hit the like button. That's right. Everybody, really? We got 44 people here at 11. We're only at 25%. Come on, man. Neil, what's going on? Change never worked for the better. Change always brings about the worst. Stay the same. Wow. If I can't learn from your mistakes, why make them? That's it, right? I have made mistakes. Does pinning the gate shut count as manual control? Yes, that's manual. Why aren't you at PRI? I got stuff, too much stuff. Boost. Turboing my Gen 2 57 LT1 and a 97 Comp TA. Just got done building the engine. Nice. So what's the engine build, McBride? Is a 350? Is a 57? Is a stroker? Has it got ported heads? Come on, throw some stuff out of it. I'd be at PRI if they'd fresh thin crust pizza and soda. They probably have pizza there. I'll be at PRI tomorrow. Bring my own thin crust. There you go. I know I wanted to go. In fact, I talked to Brian about coming there and I don't know, talking at his booth or whatever. Like people would be interested in listening to what I have to say. Be telling them all that every cam is a turbo cam. I feel like people overthink back pressure. Feel like you're optimizing for flow, that it'd take care of itself. Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have back pressure on a turbo setup. You're definitely going to have back pressure between the cylinder head and the turbo, always in that exhaust portion of it, pre-turbo back pressure. That's the nature of turbocharging. I've never seen a setup that has no back pressure and still has a way to make boost. It's always going to be there. You can make it so that it's less than boost pressure. You can make it so that it's even with boost pressure. And then obviously, as in most cases, you can make it so that it's more than boost pressure. And usually there's a direct correlation between those things and boost response, but also between those things and ultimate efficiency. And it depends on what you're trying to get done. Generally speaking, wouldn't 1.4 pounds of boost gain equal roughly 28 to 30 horsepower? Not going into variables like port types. Well, it would be a function of the NA power output. So it'd be the NA power output divided by 14.7. And then that will tell you what each pound of boost is worth. So if we have I think I remember what that thing made. So let's say we have a 500 horsepower motor divided by 14.7. Every pound of boost on a 500 horsepower motor is worth roughly 34 horsepower. Any back pressure is adding restriction to the exhaust stroke and robbing power from the system. Let's see if I can answer this correctly. BTR suggested an LS7 stage 2 cam for a 416 stroker LS3. He said LS cams are better for stroker engines. I don't know what you mean by thoughts. Why do some people say it's okay to make an LS2 a 408 stroker and others say it will make the cylinder walls too thin? You can't bore that block that far. You can go 5,000s over. You can't go 30 on that block. You can do it on a 6-liter, iron block, but not on an LS2. I need to do a budget turbo LS at some point. Just need to find the right roller chassis. They definitely had pizza the last time I was at PRI. Yeah. Like you just mentioned, every cam is a turbo cam, but I hear folks saying not to boost a Chupacabra cam. Is this true, or would this work? It would 100% work. So anybody saying that doesn't know what they're talking about. We run boost on the Truck Norris cam, on my low buck truck cam, on a Chupacabra cam. I haven't run boost on that cam, but we've run that cam NA and compared it to the others, and it does essentially what they do. And running boost on it would just elevate whatever's there, just like every other camshaft. It works fine. Missed opportunity. Could have rented a U-Haul and sold high quality, affordable cams off the back. Hey, this one fell off the truck. Could have saved from the costly shipping rates. I just think if you had the right size turbo on a good turbo header design and your exhaust is the diameter of the hot side exhaust flange, you could continue to the same pipe volume. It'll be fine. Okay. A lot of guys step up the exhaust flow exiting the turbo. So they make the tube bigger than the exit of the turbo is. That's really common. 440 cubic inch LS MS M311 heads, inch and 7/8 headers, twin VSR 80s. So are you trying to do 2,000 horsepower or something with this thing? What would you suggest from the headers to the turbos? I think that header probably ends in a 3-inch, I would imagine. And I think that the inlet going into the turbo isn't going to be any bigger than 3 inches. So I think you're fine with that. And then exiting the turbo, I don't know what the outlet flange is on the hot side of that turbo, but I would do 4 inches at least. Can you relate that boost math to rear wheel horsepower, or should you only divide the flywheel horsepower? It would be more, you could do it both ways. You would be more accurate if you did it flywheel and then took away whatever the losses were when you go from a flywheel to a wheel horsepower thing. It's not going to work exactly. It's just to give you a rough estimate anyways. You're going to start lower with the wheel horsepower. So there's some compensation there already. You could do it with wheel horsepower. Like if you're making 300 wheel horsepower and you divide it by 14.7 and then you add boost to that, it's going to get you close. 350 stock compression ratio, forged pistons. I was super busy working for a new IMSA team last year, so I kept it simple. Sent the heads out to LE for porting and their custom cam. What is LE? Is that Lingenfelter? Was it Norris's truck that fell off? That's good, Neil. I like that. Does a step up actually help? Yeah, it helps. It helps with exhaust flow. 15 to 1800. Yeah. So all the stuff I said is fine for that. Would love to see you do a look at pioneers like Harry Miller of Indy and dirt track racing. My reading says he and yourself looked at engines in a similar way. Miller has a lot of amazing stuff. I mean, just if you go back and, because I'm familiar with that stuff, if you go back and look at Offenhauser motors or in any of these motors, if you look at the things that they made, not like if you look at the discharge tubing from the boost into the motor from blowers normally, but if you look at the way that they increase the surface area on the aluminum that they use, it's It's like works of art. It's amazing. How important is back pressure in a turbo exhaust setup in relation to what? Back pressure, like I said, will always be there. So how much you want is going to be in relation to how responsive you want it to be, the size of your NA motor, the power output of your NA motor, the size of your turbo, all of that stuff is interrelated. So I don't know what you mean by how important is it. If you can get a 600 horsepower small block Chevy NA instead of with a turbo, would you choose an NA option over a turbo? For what application and for what are you doing? A turbo motor will, if they both make 600 horsepower, a turbo small block compared to a 600 horsepower NA small block, the turbo small block will be a lot faster and quicker if you're drag racing. It will make a lot more average power because a 600 horsepower NA motor is going to make, let's say, 500 foot-pounds of torque. A 600 horsepower turbo combination could make 700 foot-pounds of torque, depending on how you have your booster set up. But it depends on what you're doing. It depends on what class you're racing in. It depends on what you want. Would 2.5 choke it out? We're anywhere from 5 to 9 kDA, and spooling can be an issue. So 2.5 to what? Yeah, I don't think you're going to have a problem with 2.5 either. If you all of the stuff that I run on the engine dyno is all the single turbo stuff is 2.5 inch. And all of the big bang stuff that we did was 2.5 inch also, except for the last one. I think that the last one was 3 inch, but it has to neck down to the size of the turbo anyway. So the flow rate of the turbo is like, you're not going to build back pressure because the system flows less than the turbo does. Your exhaust setup feeding the turbo is more, even at 2.5 inch, is going to probably outflow the turbo. While on the subject of turbo exhaust, Elliott Portworks, okay. Well, on the subject of turbo exhaust, have you seen a difference with long exhaust with multiple bends versus something short like a header or hood exit? Are you talking about the turbo after the exhaust after the turbo? The length, a longer length of tubing of any given diameter and a longer length of tubing with more bends is going to be more restrictive. But that being said, if you've made it so that it's big enough and the bends are gentle enough that the exhaust after the turbo has enough to support the turbo anyway, it doesn't matter how many bends you put in it. If it's enough to support the turbo and there's no restriction to the turbo, then it's fine. If you keep making it smaller and keeping it more, make it more bendy, like we showed here on this exhaust thing, you'll start to have restrictions. Lloyd Elliott Portworks, okay. I've never seen anyone. Is that the Lloyd Elliott is the guy that does the LT1 stuff, right? I've never seen anyone not run at least 14 inches of downpipe, but actually happens if there's nothing on the turbo output flange at all. It doesn't flow as well if you just have the flange exit out. If you have a length of tubing, it flows better. If you have a cone outlet, it flows better. And also, where are you going to put your O2 sensor if you just have it exit out of the turbo like that? I wanted a twin turbo Pontiac 461. Goal is 1,000 horsepower for drag racing. Your Big Black Chevy video showed 2 GT45s. Would it be better off with a pair of T76s? I think GT. I don't know how responsive you want it. 2 GT45s is like 1,500 horsepower. So if you're only wanting 1,000, what that means, the way that I look at turbos, is that if you have 1,500 horsepower with a turbo, you have extra lag. So if you want them to be more responsive, then you could go with smaller turbos. And honestly, you could go with better turbos than that too. The GT45s are always the one that I recommend because they have a really good combination of power potential and cost. And so you can have more power potential and more response. But when you do that, you slide up the cost scale too. Isn't that true if you're building a lightweight streetcar with big blocks, natural torque versus a turbo setup that you can run the Mac valve? The turbo power be easier to control versus the big block? Yeah, are you trying to legislate traction? Is that what you're trying to do? And now picturing a cone coming off the back of the turbo with an O2 sensor stuck in it. Just massive flames for anti-lag. When we run stuff on the dyno, whether it's an NA motor that has a header and then a collector extension, you just want to make sure that the O2 sensor is far, is far enough away from the end, because what you get is you get reversion and you get dilution of the exhaust. So the O2 sensor is not reading properly. So you get that also on a turbo until the thing gets spooled up, and then you have all the hot exhaust energy going out, and then nothing can come back in. Then you get a true reading. But like at idle and stuff, you don't. So you want to make sure that the thing is long enough that you get a true reading at idle if you're concerned about that on the dyno. I finally finished assembling my 355 after 3 years. 9.84 to 1. 264 cam, Brodix 180 heads, Performer air gap, 650 ABS, 700 R4, waiting on converter. Nice. That's going to be a fun driver like street combo, right? Duke, what's going on? Good evening. Great to catch up on the live. Where is it evening at? Where are you at? What country are you in? I don't know why you would, but could you measure O2 before the turbo? You can, and I think I've seen some factory setups that do that, but the temperature is pretty hot before that, so I don't know about the O2 life. It's pretty famous for LT1 stuff, but he does LS stuff as well. Once you know how to make airflow and know how to make power, I think you can apply that to a lot of different combinations. Greater London. Okay. I was wondering. Shout out to London. Top of the morning to you. Or evening, I guess. For us, it's morning. It's only 10 o'clock here. That's because I'm in Cali. Going back to Cali. I don't think so. All right, I got my royalty statement for one of my books. So how much money is this book going to pay me? What do you guys think? Is it more than $1.50? Let's see. No, it's not. Let's see. Oh, yes, it is winning. Which one is that? That's the Hemi book. Which one is this? Hemi. Yeah, Hemi book. Hemi book, throwing it out there. Okay, so how much money did this royalty check I get from Hemi? How much is it? Everybody guess. There. How much different is an LT compared to an LS3? An LT, like a Gen 5 LT? It's the LS3 guys would be flamed if I tell them this, but I think the LT motor makes a lot more power. T3 versus T4, is the power output really big? I currently have a turbo with a T3 housing. It depends on what the other side is. It depends on what both sides are. Do you have for a long time, guys ran T3 turbos or T4 turbos, and then way back, they decided that, hey, we could get, for the smaller motors that are efficient, like a Honda motor, we could have a T3 hot side and then a T4 cold side. And as long as we combined that right with the right displacement of the Honda, we could get, good power. So we had lots of those that worked well. For V8 stuff, obviously a T4 hot side, because the bigger the displacement is, the more exhaust side flow that you're going to need. Zach, O2 needs to be pressure compensated. $1 million, Sean. Yeah. 1/1,000,000th of a dollar would be more accurate. Wideband probe placement. How far back down the down pipe can go for sensor longevity versus MS lag? How far down the downpipe? I honestly don't think I've seen the readings that we get from placing the sniffer in the tailpipe versus placing it right at the thing. And for tuning, that's not an issue. There's not enough of a delay for that. Is it enough to turbo the truck? No, I don't think it is. Oh, it's definitely not if I had to buy something more than just a turbo. I'm contemplating rebuilding a 400 small block with Vortec heads, hydraulic flat cam. Should I redo the heads with spring upgrade and roller cam or add a turbo to the current setup? Always the answer is add a turbo. I don't think you need a roller cam. I like them because they're less troublesome. But if you have a 400 small block, you're gonna have to do a retrofit hydraulic roller if you do that. So a cam button in the front, which is also problematic. I think you could get away with a flat tappet cam. You could put the Vortec heads on it. The springs that are on the Vortec heads, because they were for a hydraulic roller cam, albeit a fairly small one, as long as they have, I think you just put a spring on it and be fine with it, and a flat tappet cam. Not enough royalties for what's in the book. Yeah, I agree with that. I miss the good old days of buying used repair manuals off of eBay. I hope your book does well. We all benefit from it. Yeah, that's the Hemi book. The Honda book is the one that did the most. $2.05, $10. Yep. I have gotten lots of those, that kind of thing. I always tell Lisa when I get a check for that, I'm like, see, this is why you married a famous author. I have several dollars. Oh, the older gen stuff. Where can I get your book? The books are available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and stuff. They should be available online, or at SA Designs is the name of the company that has the books. I think you just buy ebooks. I think you buy electronic ones too. TD05 with a split O2 housing, 2 exhaust side wastegate, 2-inch, then 2.5-inch to rear. What is the time period of the royalty? It's forever. It's as long as they'll sell the book, as long as they think that the book is still selling and profitable to them. What is the fundamental difference between an LS1 and an LT1? Is that what you're asking? That seems like a thoughts question. Bought your truck plus cam for a 395 LS stroker. How do you think the power curve will be? Horsepower guess. I don't know anything else about it other than the displacement right now, Ranch. So you'd have to tell me more. Like, what are the heads that you're using? What is the intake that you're using? What is the compression and all that stuff? 12 to 15 inches, $250. No, not $250. Might mean longevity of the sensor. On the Holly kits, the NTK sensor is more robust and lasts longer than the Bosch. I agree. There's definitely a difference between sensors. T3 is limited for the downpipe size with 3-inch support, about 450 horsepower on a 5.2. A 3-inch after the turbo would be fine. Using a T3 on a 5.2, I don't know about that. Is it a GT3582 or something like that? What is it? Forget sensor longevity or latency. Have you seen AFR changes based on O2 placement? Not changes in AFR, only the time lag. The reading is the same. I had a Boss O2 sensor go badly just by opening the box. Was it just too much oxygen? It just couldn't handle it. I think I'd get a flat tappet cam just to say the words flat tappet because it would make me sound like I know what I'm talking about. There you go. India is the place to be. There you go. Suggestions on a scavenger oil pump for a bed-mounted truck on a turbo. I don't know. I've not used those. The only one that I've ever used was sent to me with a Hellion turbo kit for a Coyote. So that's the only one I have experience with. So I don't have a bunch of those that I've tried. Excuse me. Duke Innovates are reverse compatible with 4942. 42 sensors is much better. I'm fitting a heat sink bung to try and cool it a little bit. I guess a roll to is tree fitty. It was actually, this one was actually not bad. This one was $134. Wait, let's see. Oh, wait, I take that back. Oh no. Oh, that's for the yeah, that's for the Hemi book. Oh, there's another one. Oh, the Honda book. $48 strong on the Honda. Lisa and I can have drinks tonight. Shoe money tonight. Can anybody tell me what TV show that was from? I used a single 3-inch and muffler after the turbo, mostly because it was already there. Only about 500 wheel horsepower. Yeah, that's fine. But the check you get cut, what is the time? That's what you're being paid for. Yeah, that amount of money equates to several cents per hour, I think. What are your opinions on comps oilless turbos? I've never tried one. We tried one way back that failed when they were first starting. But after that, I haven't tried any, so I don't know anything about them or don't have any experience with them. We used to take a T3 cold side, stuff it on a T25 turbo. Now they have GTX T28s. Yeah, disco potatoes. Yeah, those are good. 706 heads, 2-inch intake valves, deshrouded, 425 stroke, and a 5.7 bore. You did a 4.125 stroke. What block did you do that in? Because I'm going to strongly recommend against that. Unless you sleeve the block. Would a 2.5-inch be better on my combo, or should I go with a 3-inch for my 355? I have long tube coated hooker headers on my 355. Is that that's your daily driver 264 cam thing? A 2.5 inches is fine. I had an S488 on my LS2, 3.5 inch exhaust. It installed a 4-inch loud valve right after the turbo, gained 3 to 4 pounds of boost. Manual controller went from 16 to 20. Crazy difference. Yeah, I don't doubt that. That's enough turbo where you could definitely benefit from that. What was on an S488? What is doesn't that have a 4-inch V band on it, or does it have a 3.5-inch V band on it? Can't even get your own cam for that. I know, right? I might be able to talk. I know the owner. I might be able to talk to him. Might be able to give me like a good guy deal. Give me the bro deal. Cheap $50 Edelbrock fluid pumps from O'Reilly's. Oh, for his transfer deal for the oil. Blowing plenty of sensors. Maybe just last longer. Another meter back. Do you think that you're hurting the sensor from temperature? I mean, we run 802s. When we run those, we run them, I don't know, they're 3 or 4 inches from the head. So I don't know if it's that. But maybe on a turbo motor, maybe it's hotter. I'm stuck running 3 inches off of 3 inches off the turbo Borg 366 on 6-liter. I'm concerned it will bottle it up with just that. Limited on space. That's what I had to work with. Would be interesting to see the data at 20 pounds. So you have twin Borg 366s, but you have a 3-inch coming off of each one of them. That should be fine. Would running an intercooler NA pick up power? Would it be sensible? Would you think there'd be a change? That's been done. I've gone over this many times. That's been done at Bonneville, where guys ran an NA motor, ran ice water, had a big intercooler, but had the air going through the intercooler to the motor pressurized. So they were pressure feeding across that into the motor. If you were having to draw through that, it would be very hard to not make that a restriction to a naturally aspirated motor. Even if you got a change in temperature, you first have to offset whatever restriction that is. By pressurizing it like they did, there was no restriction. More than you would make as a race car, as a race car mechanic. I've done that. I've spent lots of money going racing. It's very expensive. Got to get back to work. Running an intercooler NA just introduces restriction. Our Bosch O2 is bad. We've used them before. I've always had good luck with them. I haven't had any problems with them. I haven't done, I mean, you know, to really answer questions like that, you need to do a comparative analysis. And I don't really think people have done that. Ranch, you have a 5.7 aluminum block. That doesn't have a long enough sleeve length unless you've sleeved it for a 4125 stroke. So you're going to be bringing the piston out of the bottom of the sleeve. And it's not a good choice. We don't ever go more than a 4-inch stroke on those on a stock block unless it's sleeved. The exception might be the LS7 block, but the others are not long enough. Bosch O2 is not the problem. It's how they're used. Never got a Bosch O2 sensor back when I worked at a parts store. Bosch's are okay unless running rich. They'll burn out frequently. One of the problems at Westech we had, or that they had, I also had the problem because we were doing it, but running leaded race gas on a lot of these would reduce the life of the sensors, definitely. Greetings from, Panama. What's going on, man? That's awesome. I like getting people from other countries. That's fantastic. Our LS7 cam specs advertised with 1.8. Yeah, the lifts are with 1.8s because they have a factory 1.8 rocker. You can get their load lift, but the lift at the valve is with the 1.8. But you can run them with a 1.7 like I did on the 5.3 test where we ran the LS7 camshaft and the LS9 camshaft, which are almost identical. And then we tried to run it, the LS7 with a 1.8 rocker. That's when we got into valve float because we didn't have enough spring for that rocker. We didn't run it with the LS7 rocker because you can't put an LS7 rocker on a cathedral port head because where they have the rocker stud or bolt mounted is in a different position. Okay, 3 Bosch sensors go bad in basic autometer wideband gauge setups on pump 93. Wow. Driving around, I plan on doing gauges on the Omni, and so I'll have a boost gauge on there. I want to have an air fuel gauge on there too, and then I'm just figuring out what the other one I want. I don't know, maybe EGT or something. When does switching from E85 to methanol benefit you power wise? Anytime you have boost. 5-inch V-band on the S480. I thought that they were gigantic size. Would you ever run a 3-inch single exhaust on a 900 horsepower turbo LS? 63% saying no. Okay, so we'll have another poll here. Okay, very simple poll, very easy, straightforward. 3 words. There we go. 100%. What? We had 100% no there for a second? I'm so disappointed. It should be 100% yes. Run 110 once in a while, almost 2 years. Square body has been turbocharged, been through 5 Bosch sensors. And I have other setups with Bosches that have never had an issue. Have you made a video explaining LSA? There, you can just go online and read about that if you want a definition of that. I have a video up where all we varied was the LSA. Lobe separation angle is just the middle point of both lobes and the degree between those two, between the intake and exhaust. Sack squatch is real. Changed from 5-inch exhaust to 6-inch exhaust and picked up 50 horsepower on a 15.2 liter Caterpillar. Really? 6-inch exhaust? That's like man size. Yeti is real. You can buy them. I've seen those. I've seen those at Pacific Hardware. I've seen it in Birmingham, UK, running over lots of cars, jumping. They are cool. Lots of different versions of Bigfoot too. Can you put 1.8 on 823 heads? I have 0.68 spring 680 spring kit. No, you can't put the LS7 rockers on a cathedral port or a rec port head other than the LS7. When seeking knowledge, it's always the opposite of what the government tells you. No, nothing that they say is right. I'm headed back to work. I got a Porsche GT4 RS. Nice. Need to get ready for Roar. Good luck with your builds. Good luck on the Porsche. The NGK sensors have a longer life with leaded fuel than Bosch. Yeah, the Westech guys switched over to those. Talking 6-inch exhaust. Meanwhile, I'm hoping a single 3 will support 460 horsepower small block. Sack squatch. Is Sack squatch? Does he actually play the sax? Because that'd be a really talented Bigfoot. Big feet. That's awesome. Which beef jerky company has the Sasquatch? I like those beef jerky companies. I went on your website and put my information out there, an email address. Do you have small block Chevy roller cab packages? We do not. I think you might have asked the question. I answered the question, but we only have LS stuff. Late to the party, running a 3-inch exhaust on my Turbo 4.8 only because it's the biggest I can get through the X-frame on the 55 Buick, but it put a loud valve on it to dump out the fender. Okay. Is it a single 3-inch exhaust? Jack's Lynx. Okay, that's who it is. And see, anymore, I would support people that just do clever marketing. I like that. I don't drink beer, but if I did, I would want to be the most interesting man in the world beer, whatever that was. Is it Dos Equis or something? Dos Equis or Tres Equis or one of the Equis families. Check out the Cadburys. He plays the drums on it. Nice. I want to go cross country on this motorized bike I'm making. I'm contemplating converting another engine, bring it as a spare. Not sure how long my sideways mower engine will last. How is the cooling going to be on that? How is it? Is it water cooled? You got a radiator and stuff for it? 71% versus 29%. Come on, man. Got to go with the big feet. Live chat. Live. It's all the way live. What the heck is this one? Fan funding, super chats, super Snickers, super stickers, channel membership, gifting. All messages are visible. Also just bought the truck cam package. We'll be installing soon. Thank you very much. Just a marketing line? What's just a marketing line? That the Sasquatch is? Briggs and Stratton flathead, so I wouldn't think it would stay cool as long as I keep the RPM up some. Is a Briggs and Stratton is just air cooled though, right? BNR, yeah, we think so. I want to see I want to see one. Air cooled off the flywheel. Okay. Does it have a fan attached to the flywheel? Stay Thursday, my friends. Yep. Is it today's Friday, right? Oh, Thursday. Dang it. I thought this was. Do you ever see any drones over Northern California? I haven't seen any. I mean, we see drones at like the football games and things like that, but not nefarious ones. The flywheel itself is a fan. Then the pole starter cover is the shroud. Okay. My friend and I were talking about drones the other day. The ones that they're using in the wars and stuff, it's just crazy. The drone footage I like is I like to watch the shark footage. I like to watch the guys that go out on the beach and take their drones out over. They're watching the surfers and stuff, and then see how close all the sharks are to the surfers. I think that's interesting stuff because they're always there, and that's particularly here in California. We have lots of normally they're great whites, but a lot of them are juvenile great whites. We have big ones also, but normally the ones that you see are juvenile great whites. Why is it so hard to supercharge first and turbo? Why is it so hard to do both of them? It's not hard. It's easy. Used to build off-road mini bikes back in the day. They were air cooled, but we ended up doing is having a small pump up oil through the oil filter because they got hot on the trails. Okay. Bigfoot's flying the drones. I want to run a generator off the flywheel so I can have some 12-volt power. I need to see how well it will bump start before I remove the ability to pull start it. GT3582, I'm using a 5.2 Magnum. Exhaust manifolds, crossover will be 2 1/4, 2.5. Yeah, I don't think you're going to have a problem with either one of those. I'll be curious to see how that does. I mean, that's a good 500-600 horsepower turbo. So it'll be interesting to see about I'd be concerned about the hot side flow on that. These drones in the UK to drop contraband into prison. Wouldn't that be pretty easy to see though visually? I mean, don't you have to drop it into the yard? Gen pop. Just made a music video featuring a drone. Unfortunately, I have a friend in Switzerland with a classic Mini and a drone. Also had the Integrale, the same model I have. Swiss spec. Cool. How much power would an M90 and a GT45 compound make on an all-stock 4.8? Well, the GT45 is about at 750 horsepower, so you're not going to make any more than that. The compounding, it doesn't add power to it. It just adds response to the turbo. Hopefully the oil will still stay cool. What's that thing going to weigh? Boost? Bass boots? Bass boost? That's complicated. That's great. I didn't want to buy a new manifold to switch from Whipple to a turbo. Just leave the Whipple on it and twin turbo the engine. 21 Coyote Gen 4. I've been told, I haven't tried it, that a compound turbo with a twin screw is not good. I've yet to see that be the case, but that's what I've been told. So beware of that. And honestly, if I was doing it on a Coyote, I would just put a twin turbo the Coyote and I wouldn't have a blower there. An old John Deere mower with a Kohler air-cooled engine when I was a kid. Had a port off the shroud into the intake. Okay. Hopefully the whole rigging will lay less than 500 with me on it. What TV shows do you watch during the day? I don't watch any shows during the day. We try to watch stuff at night. Last night, my wife and I watched a movie called "Fly Me to the Moon," which is about the Apollo program, and then about the filming in a soundstage cover up kind of thing. And so it's a work of fiction, obviously, but it was interesting. And Scarlett Johansson's in it, so she's adorable. But it was good. We liked it. Lobu 24. I think it's because it creates way too much pressure. I think because he was saying because the twin screw has internal compression. Again, I I think we artificially increase the efficiency of any supercharger, whether it's any positive displacement supercharger, whether it's roots or a twin screw, by force feeding it. But I would like to see what the resulting pressure would be, because I haven't done that. I've only done it with a twin or with a positive displacement blower like a roots blower. But Banks did one. I think he did one on a diesel though. Thinking about setting up my twin charge 396 to run on nitromethane so I can switch on for the shows and the tracks. It would certainly help power, and it would be cool because it'd be a compound deal with nitromethane, which was even better. And then you got to add a little shot of nitrous so that you have all of the power adders covered. Is Bigfoot real? We're going to close that out at 64%. Shame on you other 36 people. Time to throw this Chevy 380 on the dyno with twins and the supercharger. We've run a turbo into that blower already, but not twins. What is the final word with turbo exhaust pressure measured? Zero back pressure is ideal. You're not going to get zero back pressure ever that I know of and still make boost. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe it is, since we can get less back pressure than boost pressure, but I think that there has to be some back pressure. yes, your 79 Coupe de Ville is the villain. We be illin in the villain. Elevate your Wi-Fi experience. Everybody make sure, go to richardholderperformance.com, buy lots of stuff. I don't know. What's high level back pressure you think is acceptable? I think the most I've ever seen is 3 or 3.5 to 1. And then less than the boost pressure is on the other end of that scale. So anywhere in there is where you're going to find most stuff. Yellowstone, yeah, is good. I've seen a couple of episodes of that. I just watched recently the first couple episodes of Bad Monkey. which is Vince Vaughn in Florida. And so there's all kinds of Florida stuff, which I like. So I think we're going to try to watch that. Back pressure rearward of the turbo. Yeah, getting rid of the back pressure after the turbo is really easy. That's not hard at all. The back pressure between the head and the turbo, that's a different thing. If Blueprint starts selling 3.6 liter LS4 cylinders capable of that, would you take this engine over a Honda K series because of the torque number? First thing is no, I wouldn't. And second thing is they won't ever sell that because that's not a real motor. they never ran that motor. That's not a real thing. But no, a K series would be better. But if you were trying to make lots of torque, and because that number that they're saying there, again, that's not a motor that they ran, and 500 foot-pounds and 340 horsepower tells me that they're not running the boost out far enough. Should have just rigged the pole like Google to give us the correct result. I don't know how to rig poles. Any recommendations for reputable performance engine builders in Southern California? Yeah, the guys that, if you want a real race motor built, the guys at Dugan's can do a good job. Dugan's engines. If you don't have back pressure in the manifold, then how would you spin the turbo? Exactly. Seen 18 inches water plus back pressure testing Cummins 6.7 diesels with Cummins Insight software at wide open throttle, pulling hard. I don't know what all that is. If I had a Coyote, I wouldn't run anything off of the crank. The snout is tiny. It wasn't meant to drive anything more than an alternator. Bet you could take him in a game of dodgeball. RB Racing makes great scavenge punch for the guy who's asking. And on that note, it is time to go. Listen to my dogs. They're barking. Literally. I'll see you guys all tonight.